For the first time in nearly 30 years, World of Sport Wrestling returned to ITV on New Year's Eve. For those who don't know, ITV is one of the basic channels here in the UK. It's channel 3 in fact, which means whether or not you have a cable or satellite subscription, you can receive that channel. And also it has a long history of showing wrestling from around 1965 to 1988 as part of the World of Sport television programme. The show was taped in Salford, Greater Manchester, featuring some of the modern names of British wrestling. The commentary was also done by some well-known names in Jim Ross and Alex Shane. The first match of the night was for the newly created World of Sport Wrestling Championship. It was Grado versus Dave Mastiff. Alex Shane and Jim Ross kept putting across this match as the new generation Big Daddy versus Giant Haystacks. Obviously Grado inspired by the likes of Big Daddy and Dusty Rhodes. Bit of a basic big man versus smaller man match. Dave Mastiff was around about 20 odd stone, Grado was about 17. Dave Mastiff dominated a lot of this match. Grado on the back foot and obviously selling the babyface way during most of this match. Dave Mastiff won this match after his cohorts, his minions, the guys with them, Johnny Moss and Sha Samuels, interfered. Johnny Moss distracted the referee Steve Linsky, who's one of the top referees in the UK, to allow Sha Samuels to throw Grado off the top turnbuckle, allowing Dave Mastiff to put him in the corner and Mastiff to deliver a corner cannonball to Grado for the win and to be that new World of Sport Wrestling champion. It said Grado on the back foot, selling for a lot of that match, obviously being the hero. The babyface, the good guy, that was obviously made clear right the way through the match and right the way through the night in fact. Afterwards we got a backstage segment with the actor Max Beasley. That's Max Beasley Sr. His son is also Max Beasley, is a very famous actor here in the UK, saying that due to the cheating of Sha Samuels, Johnny Moss and Dave Mastiff, Mastiff would have to defend his title in the main event, and the winners of most of the matches that are on the show will go through to a battle royal, where the winner of that battle royal would take on Dave Mastiff for that newly won World of Sport Wrestling Championship. Then we also got one of the two video packages having a nod to the legends of previous World of Sport days, including Matty Jones, Johnny Saint, Kendo Nagasaki, Klondike Kate, a lot of the real big names in days gone by. In actual fact, Johnny Saint, Matty Jones, Klondike Kate and Rollerball Mark Rocco were actually sitting opposite the hard camera right the way throughout the event, right at ringside, and you could clearly see them. They weren't actually announced by the ring announcer, but they were referred to by Jim Ross and Alex Shane on commentary and shown on television several times during the night. So the next match would be the ladder match. I didn't quite get why this match was on the card, what the idea of this one was. Obviously a multi-man match to include some more names, but there was no real actual prize on offer. I mean, by that time obviously we already knew that the winner of that match would go through to the Battle Royal, but I thought maybe the ladder match should have been for someone. But we saw Kenny Williams versus Sam Bailey versus CG Banks versus Delicious Danny in a nice match. Some of them took some chances. Nice suicide dive by Kenny, a couple of topes like of Sam Bailey. CG Banks did a great German suplex to take Kenny Williams off the ladder, and they all took turns pretty much, most of them doing dives onto all their opponents, a little bit by the numbers, as some of the matches felt to me a little bit. All four ended pretty much with all four of them reaching for the briefcase on two separate ladders, all four of them with just the briefcase just out of touch before Kenny Williams was able to, all the rest of them were knocked down. Kenny Williams was left standing, one leg on both ladders, and was able to take down the briefcase for the win, and again through to that battle royal. Next up was Alexis Rose versus Viper, apparently the first all-female wrestling match in the World of Sport Wrestling history. Apparently Klondike Kate only took on men on the World of Sport televised shows. This was kind of a glorified squash match for Vipers. Vipers with something like 7 years experience. Alexis Rose has 2 years experience. Did put up a good fight, but Viper, who apparently had about a 50% bodyweight advantage on Alexis Rose. Hopefully Viper didn't mind Jim Ross talking about her weight. I think he cited her as 209 pounds. She is well built, but very talented. One of the top women in the UK for certain. Won by a great running senton on Alexis Rose. Really good match. Alexis Rose looked good for just 2 years experience. It was good that I was glad that Viper took the win in that match. That would be the only match where the winner would not go through to the Battle Royal. Now, I think that's always because there was a woman. Male on female violence isn't really encouraged by British television. Viper's done many intergender matches, whether it be here in Dundee for Scottish Wrestling Entertainment, or other companies. She held the SWE Future Division Champion and had feuds with the likes of the Jackal for that championship. So Viper can and is willing to take on the guys, but obviously must have been a television thing, an ITV thing maybe, to decide that the winner of that match would not actually go into the Battle Royal. Although we did learn that there would be a mystery wrestler in that Battle Royal. The next up match was Mark and Joe Coffey versus Ashton Smith and Rampage Brown. Again, another a little bit by the numbers tag team match. Good control by the Coffeys and Ashton Smith and Rampage Brown on what they thought were their weaker opponent. Mark and Joe isolating Ashton, Rampage and Ashton isolating Mark. Decent match, good tag team match. Mark and I don't know what the history is between Ashton and Rampage when it comes to teaming up, but Mark and Joe Coffey are genuine real life brothers. They used to team up on a regular basis. Not sure whether there's any promotion where they still do, but lately Mark has been working with other partners and Joe has been concentrating on a singles career in the main promotions that they wrestle for. But quite a good, I think a decent match. Both teams obviously breaking up pinfalls on their partner. The finish came when Ashton super kicked Rampage. When Joe moved out of the way, Rampage had held him. When Ashton went to super kick Joe, Joe moved out of the way, and obviously Ashton super kicked Rampage right down and out of the ring, which led to an uppercut on Ashton by Mark, and then a discus clothesline by Joe, which led to the pinfall and the win for the Coffey Brothers. Both of them through to the Battle Royal. El Ligero versus Zach Gibson was the next match. This was kind of supposed to be a cruiserweight versus technical wrestler. I thought Alex Shane tried to hype them up a little bit too much, especially Zach Gibson tried to declare that the lineage of the great technical wrestlers all came down to Zach Gibson. I haven't really seen a tremendous amount of Zach Gibson, I'll admit, but he gave it a little bit too much hype. It was a good technical match though, some good moves, good fighting over the limb control, especially arm control by both of them throughout the match. Nice drop kick to the head by Ligero, great middle rope dive and Hurricane Rana as well, and a standing moonsault which led to a 2 count for El Ligero. Good Spider-Man fake dive by El Ligero on Zach Gibson as well, which sent him cowering a little bit. I thought El Ligero, watching it again, might have just about saved himself when he did the Spider-Man. It looked like for a second that he might have lost control. Actually, that Alexis Rose Viper match, Alexis Rose almost slipped off the middle rope when doing a diving cross body. Luckily she was able to get the dive enough to make it look decent. If she'd slipped a little bit more, I think she would have fallen to the feet or onto the canvas right in the front of the feet of Viper. But maybe, yeah, again, maybe it's a different ring. It was 20-foot ring. Maybe the ropes were slightly different to what some of them were used to, because I think a couple of them might be a little bit of trouble through the night, but uh, a good match. See for springboard DDT um, for El Ligero for the win, and to go through to that battle royal. It was quite a decent match. Then it would be the battle royal itself: Grado versus Kenny Williams versus Mark Coffey versus Joe Coffey versus El Ligero versus Sha Samuels versus Johnny Moss. This was again a kind of typical battle royal, near eliminations, teaming up by Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss. The Coffey brothers would try and work together several times. It would be Kenny Williams eliminated, then El Ligero eliminated. Samuels and Moss would fight the Coffey brothers and then eliminate both Coffeys. After it looked like both Coffeys were going to eliminate Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss separately, they were able to turn it around and eliminate either side, ramp side and the other side, Mark and Joe Coffey. And then it was the time for the mystery wrestler to appear. It was the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith Jr., also known as Harry Smith, former WWE Tag Team Champion, who had been working in Japan and various independents, just actually gained the rights to the name that his father used in the British Bulldog, so he's now wrestling as British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith Jr., which actually, apparently from interviews I read on his social media, apparently it really does go over very well in places like Japan. Apparently they really like that. Davey Boy Smith Jr. This is one of the bits of the show that left me scratching my head a little bit. Davey Boy Smith Jr. came in and he starts beating up Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss, who at that point it was Sha Samuels, Johnny Moss, and Grado, and then Davey Boy Smith came into the match. One of the things that made me scratch my head was that Davey Boy beat up and tried to eliminate Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss, but then Grado was just sitting in the corner. In fact, we saw a couple of good shots of Grado when Davey Boy came out, and he was like, big surprise face and really excited. But when Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss started using the numbers game against Davey Boy and beating him up, Grado just stayed in the corner where he was. I don't think that made sense. I would have liked it, even if he'd been caught in a sucker punch, I would have liked to see Grado get up, try and help Davey Boy, even be sucker punched or beat down by Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss back into the corner. At least Grado make an effort to go and help Davey Boy. But he didn't. I was scratching my head at that one. I didn't think that made quite sense. I would have liked to see Grado. I know he'd been beaten down, he'd had a hard match, he'd been attacked by Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss, and they must have difficult match, but I would like to see Grado show a little bit more of the fighting spirit that a hero is supposed to have, and try and at least help Davey Boy. But the numbers game caught up to Davey Boy, and Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss was able to eliminate Davey Boy Smith Jr. Then Grado comes out and starts trying to beat up Johnny Moss and Sha Samuels. He was actually able to win the match by eliminating those two. He eliminated Sha Samuels after hitting both Moss and Samuels with a double clotheslining Sha Samuels again, this time over the top rope, and then pulling down the top rope to eliminate an onrushing Johnny Moss. Did it a couple of seconds too early, in my opinion, a little bit. Pulled the rope down a little bit too early. It was a little bit telegraphed. But Grado ended up winning that Battle Royal and secured himself a rematch with Dave Mastiff. At that point, Sha Samuels and Johnny Moss actually returned to the ring, and obviously they were still ringside, but returned into the ring, attacked Grado, taking out one of his knees. That point, Davey Boy Smith Jr. returned, ran back down the rampway and fought off Shah Samuels and Johnny Moss, and actually had paramedics, ambulance crew come down to check on Grado just as they went to commercial break, with Akshay and Jim Ross obviously questioning whether Grado would even be able to take on Dave Mastiff in that World of Sport Championship match. After the break, we had that Dave Mastiff versus Grado match. Grado actually obviously had been taken back to the back during the break to be tended to by the paramedics, and he actually came out with the ambulance crew. Obviously, just I believe they may have been genuine ambulance crew, but they were kind of trying to hold him back, kind of say you shouldn't wrestle, but he actually, especially after the promo that Dave Mastiff then got, calling Grado a loser and so forth. Grado obviously wanted to take on Dave Mastiff and did so. Again, a typical big man versus small man match. Dave Mastiff, the World of Sport champion, defending his title and dominating this match. I thought though Dave Mastiff lost a little bit too easy. Dave Mastiff, this match didn't last too long. It lasted about 8 to 10 minutes. Dave Mastiff tried a body splash in the corner on Grado at the end of the match. Grado moved out of the way. Dave Mastiff's head and shoulders went through the middle and top ropes. Supposedly hit his head on the ring post, which let Grado have the opportunity to deliver a cutter on Dave Mastiff, which then actually surprised me a little bit. He got the 1-2-3 after that. I thought maybe Dave Mastiff went down a little bit too easily after such dominating performances in the first match, and then in that main event. I thought maybe Dave Mastiff fell to Grado just a little bit too easy, and maybe a kick out, and maybe another wee boot and another cutter for Grado. The big boot to the face, he calls it the wee boot. Maybe just a little bit more, a couple more moves, and I think that would have actually helped it a little bit. I thought Dave Mastiff got pinned just a little bit too easy for my liking. Overall, I've got my thoughts. I've got a couple of negative and a couple of positive thoughts before I give my overall thoughts. First of all, the negatives. Negatives, the crowd were queued a couple of times, especially early on. Maybe it's their way of warming up the crowd. I don't know how they warmed up the crowd, whether they started the show. I don't know whether there was any dark matches or any, because typically like here in Dundee in Scottish Wrestling Entertainment, we can actually see Grado at the Ardler complex on January 28th. Normally the ring announcers, they cheer the crowd. They have like one side of the crowd clapping and cheering, and it spreads like a Mexican wave all around to the other fans. So we're all cheering, and that by the time just kind of warm up the crowd, and they do it very well. Do it from one side right around, because the crowd goes like 3/4 of the way around the ring. Obviously, it starts from one side and works all the way around to the other. So I don't know what the setup for warming up the crowd were, but they were queued a little bit too much, a couple of times, because it was obviously the way they put their hands up. They were queued to do that because they put their arms up at an angle. All of them did at the same time. It was obviously they were being queued a little bit. Too many shots of the crowd also for me. A couple of points, there were several shots of the crowd altogether in about 30 seconds. Just odd times as well. The camera work was good, but just a little bit too many crowd shots, too many times together at a few points during the show. Also, the backstage interview with the authority figure GM Max Beasley, it was obvious that when we had the segment when he set up the Battle Royal, it was obvious that that was earlier in the day, because you could clearly see behind him workers working on a lighting rig, which obviously wasn't going on during the show, unless it was supposed to be another stage. Several people pointed out on Twitter I don't think it was supposed to be another stage, another event going on in the same studios. It was a little bit obvious it was filmed earlier in the day. Obviously, I know the limited cameras, they can't do everything, as a live show. I understand that limited cameras, limited camera operators, but I think they could have done a little bit better. Just back behind it looked like, yeah, they're obviously setting up for the show, and not, it's not, it was supposed to be an interview happening as the show unfolded, as that had just happened. But yeah, maybe there's a little bit, maybe it's a small thing, but it was, I said, noticed by a few people, myself included. Again, maybe limitations, but we could have just done it a little bit, change, maybe just have the camera operator, have Max Beasley and the interviewer Rachel just around a little bit, even so they're in front of equipment stuff, so you can't see that kind of stuff. Okay, maybe it's a small thing, maybe I'm nitpicking here, but yeah, it was noticed by a few people, including myself, and I thought that, immediately thought it was obviously well pre-recorded when I saw it. But again, maybe it's a small nitpicking thing. The wrestler felt a bit light at times. Sometimes I understand. Maybe they're not wanting to go full force and right on it for that show. Obviously, they've got other shows, they've got other commitments, other dates to fill. But sometimes the wrestler felt a little bit light at times, and sometimes in some of the matches, a little bit by the numbers, and a little bit too showy at times as well. I would also, the last negative, I maybe would like to have seen a rules video. Like I said, we saw a couple of videos talking about the talking about the legends of the world of sport. I would maybe like to have seen a comparison of the rules between the old world of sport and the what's called really the American style, that is pretty much the norm here in the UK. There are very few promotions that even use the world of sport round system. That used to be the system used on the world of sport, and maybe some people who may not have watched wrestling since world of sport went off the air might not have quite known what the rules were. They obviously know it's wrestling, but they know it's professional wrestling, but they might have actually gotten a little bit lost of what. Oh, okay, well, why is there no rounds, and why is the referee allowing this? Why is this happening? And I would like to have seen a comparison video about the rules of world sport and in 2016 and the old world of sport rules. Again, maybe limitations prevented them from doing that, but we had a couple of Legends videos. They could have maybe had one Legends video and then maybe one about the difference about modern day wrestling to the wrestling since the 1980s. The positives, because there are some positives to take away from this. Rachel, the backstage interviewer, was good. She was decent. She's not one of those blonde bimbos that has not a clue what's going on. She's a sports reporter. Apparently, she was seemingly genuinely interested in what was going on, and she had a clue what was going on. Whether that, I don't know whether she's a fan of wrestling. I don't know what her connection is, but she did. It was obvious that she had a clue what was going on. She come across as intelligent. She understood the situation. She understood what the story was as well. The commentary by Jim Ross and Alex Shane was actually good as usual. Jim Ross is a good commentator. A little bit too many of the use of sayings, of his typical sayings by Jim Ross. I liked the one where he just talked about Dave Mastiff being a refrigerator on a turnbuckle. When Dave Mastiff was up for a senton during, I think it was the first match. That was a good line. But Jim Ross, maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe they wanted Jim Ross to hit a lot of his, kind of copyrighted, typical Jim Ross sayings. He wasn't too over the top. I think a couple of times he slipped into it, saying several of the sayings. Maybe it's just his style. Maybe that's what makes him comfortable. But Jim Ross knows his stuff. Some people were concerned when Jim Ross was announced as a commentator on this, but Jim is actually very aware of the history of wrestling in the UK. Last year, now obviously it's now 2017, when he was over for a comic convention, I don't know whether he actually got it, but he was actually genuinely wanting a picture with the likes of Matty Jones and Johnny Saint. There were a few British wrestling legends at the convention. He knew who they were, and he knew at least some of the history of wrestling in the UK, and he obviously done his research. He knew who the guys and women were that were appearing during the matches. He knew them, whether he, I don't know whether he talked to them, whatever. But Jim Ross, if he doesn't know the people, he does his research, and he'd obviously done it and had good knowledge of what was going on, and he told a good story, which is what Jim Ross does. And Alex Shane was a good colour commentator as well, kind of guided him a little bit, but good production values as well. Some pyro, some lights, well lit building. Wasn't dark and dingy like it was a studio obviously, but it was very well lit. We could see the audience, we could see the action going on. There wasn't any problems with the cameras not being able to show the action. I think the camera work was good. I don't know whether it was ITV people or was it wrestling people that did the camera work. Good, decent editing as well. But the camera, it wasn't dark and dingy. It wasn't a problem at any time if the wrestlers were wrestling outside the ring to see what they were doing. So good, decent production values and decent, it looked like editing and graphics packages as well. Also, again, I enjoyed the video package about the legends. I already mentioned that. So I think there's definitely some negatives, a couple of negatives, but a couple of positives to take away. Overall, I thought it kind of reminded me a little bit of the holiday camp one night stories that old holiday camps and old touring shows do. Nowadays, modern professional wrestling companies, they do ongoing storylines, they do ongoing things. It kind of reminded me, because I've seen it a couple here in Dundee, All-Star Wrestling a couple of times. It's one night storylines, pretty much like it was like Grado was cheated out of the championship, then he comes back to take on and defeat the big villain and claim that championship. Also, it was a bit pantomime-esque. It was a bit obvious, with Dave Mastiff cutting the promo, obviously, using a little bit kind of filthy language. Well, not really filthy language, but shut your filthy gob when talking about Grado, and it was a bit. It was made obvious in a bit of a pantomime way that who the good guys were, who the bad guys were. But I think this was obviously a television wrestling show rather than a televised wrestling show. What I mean by that, it was obviously a wrestling show made for television rather than a wrestling show that happened to be shown on television. But to be honest, I think it did its job. It was supposed to be a bit of a kind of obvious introduction to modern British wrestling to the general public, and I think they did that. They introduced. It was also not exactly what modern British wrestling is. It was a little bit of a pantomime version of it, a little bit, but the intention was to do a bit of an obvious and simple introduction to British wrestling for modern viewing audiences, to the general public, and that is exactly what they did. So I think they achieved what they wanted. I'd like to see maybe a few more episodes and have it. If they do more episodes, if they do a series, maybe kind of build the IQ of it a little bit. It was a little bit simple in my opinion, but I'd love to see so many more great talents across the UK being involved. But overall, it was enjoyable. You don't expect too much of this. I think it's enjoyable. I know it's on YouTube. It's still on the ITV Hub, I believe. But overall, an enjoyable show. It was what it was. Again, it was what it was supposed to be. It was a television wrestling show rather than a televised wrestling show.